Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. The Honorable Mr. Asrori as the lecturer of Seminar on Research Proposal, the Honorable Mr. Ahmad Munir and Mem Wiwit Eva Safitri as the examiner, and everyone who watched this video. I am Rizky Apriliana Yanti, and in this occasion, I'm going to present my seminar on research proposal entitled The Effect of Simulation Technique in Enhancing Vocational High School Students' Speaking Skill. Well, this presentation will start from the background of the study. The ideal condition of oral communication competence, according to Jackson 2014, it dominates the certainty of educational standard and has already stated as one of the most desired employability skill for graduate. Means that oral communication competence is important and need to be mastered by the student. In order to build oral communication competence, according to Punkit 2010, we need supportive environment, such as the teacher, teaching technique, teaching material, and many more. But the reality, according to Kis Titwati, Refnaldi, and Resmi 2019, the teacher tend to use their mother tongue in teaching English in a classroom. It brings several problems, because some EFL learners seem reluctant in acquiring English as a foreign language, even after they learn it for years, according to McIntyre 2007. That's why, in this research, the researchers suggest a technique that may help prevent or solve the problem. That is, using simulation technique. Because, according to Circuit 2016, simulation technique had successfully developed not only speaking skill but also the student listening proficiency with greater effective impact. This study tries to answer two research questions. The first, is there any effect of the implementation of the simulation technique toward the student speaking skill? And second, is there any differences in the student speaking performance between the student who are taught using simulation technique and the student who are not? Well, the objective of the study is to examine whether simulation technique is effective or not in improving student speaking skill and to investigate whether there are significant differences or not between the student who are taught using simulation technique and the student who are not. Also, this study is aimed to help the teacher find out the suitable technique to teach speaking English, help language learner to learn English easily, and the data that will be obtained later will help the other researcher to conduct the same research in depth. This study also limited in several aspects because it focused on simulation technique that will be implemented in vocational high school, and it adopt one of their basic competence, asking and offering help. This study offers two hypotheses. For the null hypothesis, the simulation technique is considered less effective if there is no specific improvement of student speaking skill before and after implementing simulation technique. While the alternative hypothesis, the simulation technique is considered effective if there is a specific improvement in the student speaking skill before and after implementing simulation technique. This study will have several terms that we'll frequently use, such as speaking, vocational high school, and simulation technique. And those terms we'll explain briefly on the next chapter, review of related literature. Speaking. Speaking is an interactive skill taught by cooperating with other language features, according to Thornbury 2005. In assessing student speaking skill, according to Brown 2004, the teacher need to pay attention on several aspects such as grammar, comprehensibility, vocabulary, pronunciation, and fluency. And this study will focus on vocational high school, which according to Torunoglu and Geng Tanirim 2015, vocational high school itself is the school that offers a program to the student aiming to prepare them for their future life. And according to Melati 2014, the teacher need to teach vocational high school students with the material which relate to their vocation. In order to reach the goal in teaching English to vocational high school, the researcher suggests simulation technique. Simulation technique, according to Sargui 2016, is a reality of function in a simulated and structured environment. According to Lin 1993, simulation technique have several advantages such as effectively motivate learners, allow meaningful practices, encourage creativity, and etc. So, in order to implement simulation technique to help enhance vocational high school student speaking skill, the researcher use asking and offering help as the material. The next will be the methodology. This research use experimental research using pre-test, post-test only design. Experimental research is chosen because the researcher want to know the effect of one variable to another variable. Test only design is chosen because there will be a test before and after the treatment. This study will be implemented in one of vocational high school in Surabaya, and it will involve the teacher and around 20 students of 12 graders majoring in office administration. Those 20 students will be divided into two groups, experimental and control group. Those groups will play different roles. While the research instrument used in this study is situation card and speaking assessment rubric. In the situation card, there will be situation or condition where the student need to perform an oral conversation based on the material asking and offering help. While speaking assessment rubric will use to measure the result of the student speaking performance. The speaking assessment rubric will be adapted from a book written by David P. Harris by Maxie Grow-Hill. In collecting the data, the researcher follows several phases. The first, designing the instrument, situation card, and speaking assessment rubric. To check whether the instrument is valid or not, the researcher conduct validity tests using validator judgment. The researcher asks the lecturer or the English teacher to help analyze whether the instrument is valid or not. When the instrument is valid, the researcher can continue to check or to conduct reliability tests. The researcher conduct a kind of tryout to implement the instrument, and the score will be measured using EPM SPSS. When the instrument is valid and reliable, the researcher can continue to conduct pretest. In a pretest, both experimental and control group will ask to do a task according to situation card, and the score will be measured using speaking assessment rubric. After that, they will experience 3 times treatment, but the treatment only for experimental group. The experimental group will be taught using simulation technique, while the control group will be taught using the conventional technique. And the last, the researcher can conduct post-test. We conduct post-test the same as the pre-test. In order to analyze the data, the researcher first arrange the pretest and post-test score and present it in the form of statistic descriptive using EPM SPSS. After that, the researcher analyzed the normality of the data using Kolmogorov-Smirnov or Shapiro-Wilk. Next, the researcher will observe the result of the first RQ. When the data is distributed normal, the researcher will use paired sample t-test, and when the data is distributed non-normal, the researcher will use Wilk-Socon. The data that will be analyzed are the score of pre-test and post-test for both experimental and control group. After that, the researcher will compute the homogeneity of variance to make sure whether the data is homogeneous or not. Next, the researcher observing the result of the second RQ. If the data is homogeneous, the researcher will use independent sample t-test, and when the data is non-homogeneous, the researcher will use Mann-Whitney U-test. And the data that will be analyzed is the score of post-test for both experimental and control group. And finally, the researcher will interpret the result of the study on the next chapter. Okay, I think that's all for my presentation. Thank you for watching my video. I'm sorry for making many mistakes. That's all for me. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.